If you've let go of someone you were limerent over and you're thinking, why am I this ruined over this? We weren't even officially together. This is the video for you. I want to explain what actually happens to you when you pull away from someone you were obsessing over, because it does not behave like a mild breakup. When love is relatively steady and mutual, even if it doesn't work out in the end, as many relationships don't, your brain at least gets a chance to cool down from the height of intensity that can be the beginning of love. When it's limerence, when it's fantasy heavy and uncertain or ambiguous, the volume never really comes down the way it was supposed to. And then you pull the plug while you were still obsessed and fantasizing and confused. And now you're stuck in this terrible patch of why doesn't anything feel good anymore? So let's talk about why the breakup feels bigger than the relationship itself. Hi, I'm Madalena, and this is You Reclaimed. Around here, we spend a lot of time talking about how we reclaim our lives back from the grips of childhood trauma, from emotional dysregulation, and from anxiety. And we do this ongoing exercise because we want to live our lives on our own terms. I hope you stick around. Before we get into it, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any future videos. And if you're finding this content helpful, please give it a like. It really helps the channel grow. So in the last video, we talked about how limerence runs on the same reward system as addiction, and how it never really gets to cool off into that calm, bonded stage if it doesn't progress to a real relationship. That's really the main problem of limerence and why we get stuck in unrequited one-sided limerence. So today I want to pick up right there, because this is the part where people start to think, if I'm suffering this much, it must mean that this person was the one. And I want to tell you, no, a lot of what you're feeling right now is withdrawal, not some sort of destiny. Here's the first thing to understand. Anytime you're going to remove a person that your nervous system has been using to feel good, and often to regulate itself through, you're going to feel pretty bad. That's the expectation. Even in a normal mutual relationship that ends kindly or amicably, there's still going to be a dip. You were used to reaching for another person and now you can't. That alone creates a kind of emotional withdrawal. But in limerence, there's an extra twist. In regular romantic love, the beginning is very intense, all the dopamine, all the infatuation, but then if the relationship actually continues down its normal path, the nervous system slowly turns the volume down, right? And all of that dopamine transitions to other bonding hormones like serotonin, oxytocin, vasopressin. You get safety, you get predictability, and you get a real person with real flaws. And when it does turn into a relationship, your brain goes, okay, we can live here in this safe space. So when that kind of relationship ends, it still hurts, but you're withdrawing from something that was already more settled. In unrequited or one-sided limerence, that settling never happens. You get stuck in the high, in the uncertainty, in the fantasy, and in that phase of maybe this connection will work out in the end, despite all the signs that it's not going to. And your brain keeps getting rewarded for staying in the fantasy of that. And because so much of the connection itself is based in the fantasy of it, in the potential, in you putting the other person up on a pedestal, and imagining how great things could be, and hyping up all of their good qualities and downplaying their bad qualities, even more than you would without the limerence. Because of that, so much of the connection is actually based on potential, let's say, if we want to be kind. If you want to understand the stages of limerence better and figure out where you are in the great big cycle of limerence, you'll find a link to that video below in the description. It's called The Stages of Limerence and How They Hook You. Then you hit what Tanov calls the disillusion phase. The moment you finally see, oh, this is who this person actually is. Or you get to a place where you realize this, whatever this connection is not going to become the relationship that I was hoping it would become. And here's the annoying part. Yes, the dopamine around them does start to drop at this point because the hopium balloon part is deflating a bit. But you're trying to get off the ride before the ride has finished. And there's one more thing happening here, because so much of this was built on fantasy. When disillusion finally starts, you don't just drop the fantasy and walk away peacefully. You sort of wake up in jerks. One day you see them clearly. Oh, they're not actually that emotionally available, or they're not actually that interested, or we don't actually share values or share any real compatibility. And then the next day you're back to hoping they'll say something or do something to prove your suspicions wrong. So you're half awake and half still in the dream. That push-pull is really normal in limerence because your nervous system was getting rewarded for holding on to the fantasy. And your thinking brain is now trying to catch up to the reality of what you really have in this connection, to what you see in front of you. So yes, you can be getting clearer and still feel devastated at the same time, because your brain has to figure out how to cope with that first. So you have this weird combination of a reward system that was used to getting little spikes from this one person exclusively, and then a sudden loss of hope or even of contact with this person. That's why the crash of limerence feels bigger than the actual ideas you have about how you can explain why this connection hurts so much, because you're not just losing a person, you're losing the anticipation of what this person could have been like in the future. You're losing the anticipation of what the connection itself could be, the anticipation of the fantasy and what it could turn into in real life. And the anticipation was such a huge, huge component in limerence. So when you're sitting here telling yourself, I shouldn't be this ruined over this, or we weren't actually in a relationship the way you would think of a relationship, I want you to remember that you're not measuring the depth of a relationship. You're measuring the height of a nervous system that never got to taper off from the high. So once you pull away from them, or they pull away from you, or you finish this thing, most people expect to feel sad, maybe cry for a few days and slowly start to feel better. But a lot of you don't get that curve. You don't get sad and then a bit better and then a bit better. Instead of that, you get okay-ish and then flat. And then, oh my God, is this going to go on forever? That flatness has a name in addiction work, and it's usually referred to as a period of anhedonia. Basically, the inability to feel pleasure doing just about anything or thinking about anything else. For people who are addicted to hard substances, this flat period goes on for months when nothing really feels like anything. And a lot of people relapse here because they think, well, if life is going to feel like cardboard forever, I might as well go back to this person and at least feel something. And it's not hard to see why a person would feel this way. And no, feeling awful doesn't mean that limerence has done some sort of permanent damage to you and that you'll never recover and never be able to love again. What it means is that you are feeding your reward system one consistent thing over and over again. And now that that thing is gone, your system needs time to recalibrate. So think of it as a period when the system is down, not destroyed forever, which is why you really have to force yourself to be patient with yourself. This is why in the first few weeks, and often in the first months, you get stuff like food tastes dull, music doesn't matter, doesn't move you, doesn't produce any kind of feeling in you. You hang out with friends and you can do it, but you can't feel much of anything or get joy out of it. You're not really there. You can't focus on books or shows or work or anything really. And going through this period, your mind wants to make it mean something because that's what your mind does. It wants to find meaning, patterns in things. And it tries to make you believe that if you feel this way and you get pleasure out of nothing else than this person, then obviously this was your person. but this is just the mind reaching for anything. It just means that your brain got used to getting lit up in a very specific way for this one person. Because limerence is a person addiction, and the rest of your life hasn't started lighting up the system again yet, but it will. It absolutely will if you give it enough time and you give yourself enough input through the rest of your life so that you can start creating meaning again in other ways. There's another thing happening here too. Remember when we said that your brain can get sensitized to this one person? That makes this phase feel even worse because it creates this really unfair combo of now everyday life feels flat and kind of gray and not worth living, and anything connected to this person still lights your brain up if you allow yourself to think of them, to ruminate in thoughts of them, to fantasize about what things were like with them. So of course your body wants to go back to that, to feeling something intense. Your body is smart. It's thinking, if this still works, why not just keep doing more of it? There's nothing here involving destiny or twin flames or even soulmates. This is just a reward system voting for the thing that is working. This is also the phase where people tell me, I thought I was getting better, and then out of nowhere, I get this horrible, heavy, gray feeling that just will not lift. But that feeling doesn't come out of nowhere. That's the part where everything is boring and your brain hasn't started figuring out where else to turn, where else to get pleasure from, what else in life can bring you satisfaction and interest. Most people in any kind of addiction relapse right here at this point because they get tired. They get tired of waiting to feel good. And it's the same point where people go back to exes, go back to drugs, go back to drinking. That's why we go through such a serious internal tug of war when we want to text them back, when we want to talk to them again, when we want to get closure. That's just another way of trying to get into contact with someone that you know you should be done with. If you're having trouble getting through the no contact part, go watch this one. No contact isn't enough until you do this. I've linked it below. There's more you can do to help yourself than just cutting off contact, because it doesn't usually resolve just by blocking the person. This is when we tend to have thoughts like, if I could just explain myself better, maybe there's a chance that it could resolve whatever barriers there were between us. Or maybe if we can have a real heart-to-heart conversation and I can express my feelings and perhaps they can express their feelings, it'll turn out that they really are in love with me, that there are no impediments here, and we were meant to be together. There's a lot of that in this phase because we're reaching for anything that might fix this horrible feeling of nothing feels good. Relapse here can also look like I keep checking their profile, or I can't stop watching their stories, or I'm secretly driving by their house hoping I run into them or catch a glimpse of them. Or I show up to the grocery store hoping I'd catch a glance or we'd exchange a look somewhere. So if you are in this flat part, please don't judge your healing from inside of this place, because this is the worst place to decide I shouldn't have gone no contact. You're deciding on something important from the lowest of lows. If you are able to ride this part out without re-traumatizing yourself, or without resensitizing yourself further with more contact to this person, then your system will eventually start to let other things feel good again. But you have to stop redosing yourself with this person every few days, every new contact, every new bit of rumination or fantastical thinking or storytelling or running through the same conversations in your mind. It just keeps telling your brain, nope, we're still addicted to this. And it gives your brain a reason to continue. You're not feeling bulldozed over by this thing because it was the deepest, most soulmate level story that ever lived. Stories like that tend to end in good relationships. You're feeling this way because your reward system got attached the way it's supposed to get attached, but it got attached in a very intense, maybe a bit overzealous, obsessive way to this one person. And it stayed in that place, and then it didn't get to cool down properly as in a relationship. It just dropped into the depths of emotional despair and disappointment. You can't really expect yourself to feel great after that. But if you can hold on to that frame in your own mind, it becomes a little bit easier to stomach what's happening and not panic and run back the minute that you hit the flat part, which I know how difficult this part is. But if you are finding yourself in this nothing feels good window, don't judge healing right now. There's no other way that you should be doing this better. You're at the lowest point, and it's also the point where most people relapse. They go looking for closure in some way or other. They find a way to contact the LO, not because they've actually made a bad decision by walking away, but because they got tired of feeling nothing or feeling awful. Both options are just awful. And we'll talk more about feeling awful in the next video. Next week, we're going to walk through what withdrawal actually looks like. The body stuff, the obsessive thoughts, the emotional swings, and those just checking behaviors. So you can recognize them instead of thinking that you're going backwards or that you're broken forever and you're the only one going through this. Until next time. As always, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who could use it. It really helps this channel grow. Until next time.